Excuse me for my voice, but I have never seen anything like it.
You believe in miracles? Yes! Unbelievable.
Welcome back, sports fans. Andrew Zimmel, your host, as always, talking to you today from the sanctity of his parents' home. Listen, a lot of crazy stuff happening in the world today. Not only are the protests still going on in Minnesota, but we also have the worldwide pandemic that is the coronavirus. So, I usually end the podcast saying this, but I want to start the podcast saying this. Please stay safe during these times. We can't afford to lose you, the listenership. The fans of this podcast, myself included, do not want to see you go. So please wash your hands. If you're going to protest, please stay safe. There's a lot of tips and tricks on Twitter that I've seen. There's a lot of articles written on different blogs, different magazine places to help you not only fight for justice, but to stay safe doing it. So we're going to get into baseball. We've said this from the beginning. We've been doing this podcast now for 4 days. We've been trying to get one out every day. We've been keeping up to date with the baseball stuff. And let me say that I kind of called this. I knew that it was going to get a lot worse. If you haven't been paying attention, if you haven't been keeping up with baseball at all, the owners and the players have still not come to the table with an agreement that they both agree upon. What that means is the way these negotiations work, I should start, is that the owners come to the table with the initial agreement. The owners always have more leverage than the players. Your boss is always going to have more leverage than you in the workplace, and the owners are essentially the bosses of the organization. So they come to the table, and the original deal was going to be a substantial pay cut to Major League Baseball's players. It's going to be, I think, like 20% cut, which a lot of players not entirely happy with, but they were going to keep it moving. They were like, all right, in the time being, we're not very happy with this, but we want to have a season. We know what our role is. We know that we are entertainment during this pandemic. It's dangerous, to say the least, but there won't be any fans in the stadium. A lot of players were okay with doing it. Now, the ones that you saw, the Bryce Harpers, the Blake Snells, who weren't happy with the idea, were the ones that people grabbed and ran with. But for the majority of the players I have been in contact with, the majority of players who I've been able to talk to, they all seem to tell me that they were okay with taking that first deal. It's the second deal where it was like a 70% pay cut is what made the players walk away from the table. Now, I've said this again and again on this podcast. I'm not going to reiterate myself one more time. It's just to remind you, if you were working in an office and you were getting $50K a year and you came in one day during a pandemic while this entire world is burning around you and your boss said, let's give you $11,000 for the next 12 months, you wouldn't be happy. Neither are these players. So I 100% get where they're coming from. I agree with the point, the statement that the players are making. And I hope that they continue to go forward with this. The problem, however, is we have to feel for the park attendance workers. You have to feel for the sports graphics departments. And the minor league season has been canceled. And we've seen guys like Dodgers pitcher David Price, who has said that he's willing to donate some of his salary, donate some of his money to some of the minor league ball players who are going to get let go from the Dodgers organization. Now, that's a really interesting thing to me because I've never been a big David Price fan. I didn't really like him when he was a Red Sox. I'm not a big fan of him and his pitching, but this is a truly human thing to do, and I applaud him for it. Because you look at, again, I pointed out the Oakland Athletics earlier this week. Owners worth $2.1 billion. They have sold their minor league players. They will not be paying them at all. They're going to be released. They will have no compensation. And they're going to have to figure out something else to do. A lot of these guys, smart guys. People try to pretend a lot of times that minor league baseball players aren't as good, not as smart as the guys that get to the majors. But in my opinion, in the times that I have seen minor league ball players, these guys are really sharp guys. That said, having your career end in the middle of a pandemic and then also saying, hey, go find another job, kind of shitty. And especially when the owner is worth as much as he is. And it would be another thing, and then this is the last thing I'll say about the A's, it would be another thing if it was an owner who didn't constantly complain and constantly fight with the leaders of his city to get a new stadium, who, again, very wealthy, could essentially build his own stadium. It'd be one thing if he didn't have a history, didn't have a track record of doing something like that. But the problem, I think, lies in that he has this history, he has this track record of being a thorn in the side of a lot of fans, I think, outside of Oakland as well. I think that is really where the problem lies. But then you see the other side of the coin, and you look at the San Diego Padres. And the Padres and Mariners have both pledged to pay their minor league players all the way to the end of August, which would be normally when their season ends. The minor league baseball season ends in about mid-August. So it's the other side of the coin. It's interesting, again I say, interesting that another team in California and another team on the West Coast have both pledged to do this. I'm waiting to see what the ultra-wealthy, the super wealthy franchises on the East Coast do. What are the Red Sox and the Yankees going to do? I'm very curious to see what happens, especially with the way that the Yankees and the Mets both have said that they are trying to play games in their stadium in front of empty people. I'd be very curious to see what's going to happen. But you got to, like I said, you got to feel for the families. You got to feel for the park attendant workers and everything like that, because they're really the ones that are getting forgotten in this entire thing. We said this about the NBA, that if the NBA opens with no fans, well, that is good for the normal consumer. We get some NBA on TV, but at the same time, those families, those people who count on this seasonal work, working the concession stand, working the ticket booth, working, the park attendant stuff, they're going home empty-handed. Even if it's going to be, even if the players are playing. So that's it's a tough scene, I think, for a lot of people. I think it's going to be a real tough bullet to bite, I think, because when this occurs, when we get baseball back, if we get baseball back, it's going to be very tough for, I think, normal Americans who have a grasp on the entirety of the situation, who aren't just, sports are back, yay, but like people who understand like the nuances of what took to get to this point. I think it's going to be very tough. The same way that it's tough every weekend to watch college football. And I'm not trying to get on some moral high horse here, but I'm telling you that if there's a big chunk of the American population. I don't know if it's probably not the majority, but a large chunk of the American population struggles with college football, with the fact that these kids are risking their neck for an education. Like, come on, guys, let's be real here. The amount of stress that you go through studying for your SATs, your ACTs, getting to college, going through your finals, graduating in 4 years, the same mental stress that you guys are going through doing that, these football players are going through that physical stress. And mental stress, there's no link to concussions with it. There's no link to suicide with it. The same way that constant head trauma, constant, beating up on the body, malnourishment in some cases in some universities. There is a connection to a bad health with that. So that's gonna. The other thing I want to just add one more thing here towards the end of the podcast, talking about states opening up. Now, the problem is, and we've talked to Alexander Haynes about this many times, but the problem right now is that there's no unified front with this coronavirus. There's no national president. There's not, like, the president's not doing his job, A, but, like, B, there's no committee, there's no congressional committee saying, okay, these states are going to open up at this time, these states are going to open up at this time. It's pretty much just a free-for-all, which isn't great. I think that anybody could see that it's not great that if Texas opens up and New Mexico's closed or if Colorado opens up with 50% fans and Nevada can't open up with any fans. Like there's just a lot of questions, I think, with like when do people open up, who gets to open up first. Governors, I think, in some states are competing with each other, seeing who can open up their state first to say, hey, we were the first state open. We're the first state open for business. Texas opens it up to 25% fan capacity, which, to be fair, probably the bar. I don't think I want any more than 25% there. I have been on the record saying, and I'll say it again, I've been on the record saying that if there's not a vaccine, I'm not very inclined to go hang out with Joe Blow and Mary Sue. Like, I don't know if I want to hang out with you and your kids if I don't know where you've been, and especially if you're not wearing a mask, and especially if I can, like, kind of look around and see, like, hey, maybe those guys are a seat closer than they probably need to be to me. I'm not in the mood to get sick. From the top, guys, if you've had the flu, it sucks. Like, it's terrible. Why are we trying to get a worse version of the flu? Like, why are we trying to put ourselves at risk? We're not. We are not doing that. And I don't, like I said about being safe at the beginning of the podcast, we'll do it again here. Be safe. Don't do something dumb. Don't put yourself at risk if you don't have to put yourself at risk. And opening up these stadiums at this point, like, I think that the argument has been that the media has construed this or spun that, and it's all media driven, this virus, and I don't think it is. But at the same time, I think that if you get told every single day that's a bad thing, at some point people are very apathetic. They're just like, okay, it's a bad thing, whatever. But it's a bad thing, guys. It's a bad thing. Don't get sick. Please, please, please don't get sick. All right. That's going to do it for this show, talking a little bit about baseball, inside baseball. That's what we should start calling these, inside baseball. But I think that's going to do it. I think there was one more thing I wanted to talk to you guys about. The Roy Halladay E60 is coming out. I'm very disappointed they didn't make this into a 30 for 30. I get it why they didn't. I get why they didn't have the resources, they didn't have the time, I guess. I guess the story isn't as, like, fleshed out as it probably needs to be. You might be able to get one E60 instead of a 2-hour 30 for 30. So I understand what happened, but I very, very, very much wanted this to be a full 30 for 30. And maybe in the future it gets to be that. It's the story of Roy Halladay, former Cy Young, recently deceased pitcher. I think he died in 2017 in a plane crash, dealing with like his demons and his trauma and his drug and alcohol. It's just like, it's going to be a really good story. I was a big Roy Halladay fan when I was a little kid. I remember when he went to the Phillies with Cliff Lee and how I was so excited for that team. I very, very, very rarely rooted for National League teams, but I remember when that happened, I was like, oh, this is going to be so cool. This is a team that's going to win the title. I was very into it. And I'm disappointed that they didn't go very far. I'm disappointed that they didn't get the job done. But I was a big Roy Halladay fan. And when he died, I'm sad when anybody dies, but I was very sad when Roy Halladay passed away. So I'm excited to see the E60, and I'm hoping beyond hope that it's really good, because the Lance deal was really good. I'm hoping that this E60 on Roy Halladay is going to be special. All right, that's going to do it for the show. I'm recording an UFC episode with our buddy Jacob Rodriguez later today. Hopefully get that out to you guys on Monday, and hopefully you guys stay safe. Please, please, please don't put yourself at risk for the coronavirus, and please, if you are protesting, do it, and bring milk with you, because they use tear gas, and don't put yourself in a situation where there's two options, live or die. Please. All right, that's going to do it. Peace out. Talk to you on Monday.